It will compile this description into the JavaScript. So the algorithm to determine this JavaScript to execute the web application is that when you would like to extract this blue text from the HTML document, so the algorithm will first look, if we will use two-level extraction algorithm, so they will first look the parent tag of the element. So div is the parent tag, and they will use the attribute AAA is the ID attribute, and later under that we will match the child tag, which is anchor tag, with an ID link AAA. So if the algorithm found this match, they will extract the element inside the web application component. Also, when you use, a composer can use web service component to connect to any web service URL that return that support REST web services in the format of XML, JSON, or plain text. For mathematical and logical operations such as addition, subtraction, multiply, divide, comparison, GPA distance calculation, so composer can use arithmetic component to do the mathematical and logical operations. In the next subsection, we describe the automated mechanism and the composition tool for Midle. These mechanisms and tools are only applicable to the flow-based composition. So when you create a mashup, you have to decide which output context you would like to use. So for mobile application, it is an active context involving fork process. For set-thread web service and set-thread web application, it works in passive context or background process. So the problem is a background process are not permitted to execute a foreground process. So we implement a switcher mobile application. It's not permitted to call from foreground process in this gray box to from the background process to the foreground process. So we implement the switcher mobile application to enable the communication between background process, background component, and foreground component in this way. So it will run indirectly to call the foreground component from background component. We also provide a task management automation. So when composers add all the components inside the mashup, it's not only just run from the beginning to the end. So we provide the management algorithm that the process in the same hierarchical level is swapped and bound together. So the background process will be bind with the first foreground process. We also provide the evaluation of this algorithm later in the evaluation section. For set-thread mashups with a remote access, so if all the components work in the background, so all the client will receive the mashup execution results together at the same time. But if there is some foreground process inside the mashup, it will finish the mashup one by one at a time. So we call this the web session management mechanism. So we use this, we apply this to the set-thread web service and set-thread web application. So about the tool, the composer may create Midle XML description file from scratch or use Midle Designer tool. The composer required to select the context. So first you select the output context. You add component to the model pane, and from the model pane you click and configure the parameters for each component. So additionally, you can use a view extractor to extract parameters from web applications, and also you can use result list pane to list all of the data that is sending between the publisher and the subscriber messaging pattern. After you got your XML description file, you can upload it into a web server which contains the code generator and app generator. The code generator generates the source code files, and later the app generator generates the application package file. For mobile application, you will get APK file. For Thread web service and Thread web application, you will get the web archive file, WAR file. For the IGT. IGT is the web server module available on Android devices. The next section will show the application of Mido to create mobile method applications. It contains flow-based and event-based composition methods. When compare between flow-based method composition and event-based method composition, for the flow-based method composition, this method lowers the programming efforts to create methods from mobile application and web editor resources, but the display elements are borrowed from each integrated component, so they cannot be newly created or they cannot be customized in detail. And it is that non-programmers are assisted with automated mechanisms such as the task management that we presented in the section before. But for the event-based method composition, this method subsidizes the requirement to implement the native mobile programming code to access the device sensor. So you don't have to implement the part that access to the device sensors, but the component have to be prepared beforehand, and that the display elements are borrowed from HTML and JavaScript. So this allows the method development for the GUI in the expressibility close to native programming language. But this is not designed for non-programmers because you have to implement, you have to integrate the component inside HTML and JavaScript context. Next, we will show you the example of flow-based composition. The flow-based mobile method composition applies the flow formalism of Mido, the fundamental Mido. The execution in this composition allows data to deliver and execute along the input, query, and output stage. And we present an example that contains all kinds of method components. So, for example, similar to the presented demo, the video footage that we saw, the book price and description translator mashup contains the barcode reader. You read the barcode from a book, and you later use a web application Amazon to query for title and price. You send the title to another web application who reads for description and reviews. And we use a web service called exchange rate to translate a price from Amazon from US dollar into yen. And also we use a web service, Google Translation web service to translate description, to translate the description of the book and the review of the books. And also we add some of the shipping costs to the price before we summarize the mashup display in the final process. So what composers are required to perform is, first, they have to add and configure a barcode scanner and use the view extractor to extract configuration parameters from Amazon.com for product price and title. And after that, they add and configure exchange rate web service to convert price from US dollar to Japanese yen according to the web service URL format. And later, add and configure an arithmetic component to add a shipping cost to the translated price. Number 5, they also use the view extractor to extract configuration from Goodreads.com to search book descriptions and reviews from book title. And later they add and configure 2 components, the web service that connect to Google